Okay, let's move on, everybody. I just got actually a tweet here. Food prices have risen to the highest, not the highest, but by the largest increase in 3 years. Food prices. We're not even talking about gasoline, but that of course affects it because you got to get the food in different places, usually on a truck or in a vehicle that uses gas. Prices for fruits and vegetables, dairy products, chicken and beef all increase, including coffee, all increase by better than 3.5%. That's a huge jump. Gasoline jumping 5.6% just last month alone. Taking a look at the consumer index this morning, it's being hurt by the rising prices, obviously. Okay, let's usher in our guests. We can talk a little bit about the high cost of things, and we can also talk about that budget. David Mercer joining us via satellite, Democratic strategist from our D.C. Bureau 2. He probably could kick Doug Luzader in the foot if he had to, because you guys are sitting so close together there. Good to have you there this morning.
Good morning, Harris.
And David Tukey sitting next to me. He's a former deputy regional campaign manager for McCain-Palin campaign. Good to see you this morning.
Nice to see you, Harris.
Thanks for being here. Okay, let's start with 2012 and the budget. We're going to see Paul Ryan's version of what could happen or should happen in the House today, and House members voting on that, taking a very close look at that. Are you a fan, David Mercer, of the Paul Ryan? There are some Democrats out there who kind of like it.
I'm not a fan of the Paul Ryan budget, and far from it. And the reasons for that is one, we don't get any address in the content from what I've seen in reducing health care costs. So what he has done with vouchers to those that have been on Medicaid or would be coming into the program, or doing block grants to states, is to shift the cost, existing costs, and what could be rising costs to those that would have trouble affording it, as we've seen with state budgets, and those that are in the program. And so you have a shifting in costs. At the same time, you have a proposal to extend the Bush tax credits that expire in a year and a half for those that are $1 million and above, millionaires and billionaires, which accounts to them extending a cut of $125,000 a year to every millionaire for the next 10 years. If that were to happen, you're talking $1 million when we're for those taxpayers, when in fact we can ill afford that, yet we're putting it on the burden, or the burden on the shoulders of those that hardly can afford it now. And again, going back to my original thing, what creates growth and so forth is creating jobs, and I don't see that also in his budget as well.
Okay, David Tukey, the Paul Ryan plan.
I ask which plan you want to trust. Are you going to trust the plan of Paul Ryan, someone who's worked in the private sector, created private sector jobs, who has studied this issue, seems more deeply than anyone in Congress, or do you want to trust the plan of the president who, with all of his accomplishments, has never really worked in the private sector and who has intentions that are to become reelected? And so I think that we need to take whatever the president is saying with a grain of salt, especially given that quote that you had earlier, and look seriously at this more detailed, more well thought out plan that Congressman Ryan has put forward.
What in particular, hold on, David, what in particular
Sure.
do you think the American people should know about the Paul Ryan plan?
I think that there were a few editorials a couple days ago from George Will and from Phil Gramm, two people who I really trust on economic policy, saying this plan isn't perfect, but the health care savings that it doesn't seem to talk about are there for a reason, and they should recognize that compromises were made in what he proposed in order for it to actually get us on the right track again.
Interesting. Okay. By the way, the live chat is open for your comments. Wildcat1 says the Ryan plan is good. We've seen bits and pieces of it, and then he rolled it out this week, and now the House is considering it. Republicans hold a majority. You assume that it would pass there?
You assume, but you have some freshman Republican House members who have other agendas, I guess.
Okay. Speaking of this, and I think you mean the Tea Party caucus.
Potentially.
Potentially. Okay. David Mercer, as you look at what the president said yesterday, and I want to read it again, and I'm not gonna make fun and try to pretend to be his voice this time, because I think that people need to hear the gist of what the president is saying, and kind of his tone too, because that really sets forth where we're going here. the president yesterday was in front of some fundraisers or at a fundraiser in front of some donors in Chicago talking, and from our own reporter Doug Luzader apparently didn't realize that the microphone was on or that the cameras were rolling, and I said, well, everybody in the room probably had a cell phone. But anyway, he said this. This is what he told the crowd. And remember, these are people who are going to be putting money in his campaign, so he wants to show them that he's ready for the fight in 2012, whatever the fight would be. And so he picks the topic of the budget, and he said, these were his words to the congressional members about the budget, telling this crowd of donors, quote, I said, you want to repeal health care? Go at it. We'll have the debate. You're not going to be able to do that by nickel and diming me in the budget. You think we're stupid? End quote. What does this tell you about the president and his mindset going ahead? We all thought, from his own words, he was no guy who would really be swayed by drama, but this is pretty dramatic.
I'm not sure that it's dramatic. I would say that he's campaigning on behalf of working American families, and he's been doing that since he took office, and also countering what has been stated as Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, for his main objective is to defeat Obama, and he's been trying to do that ever since Obama got into office. So this is a constant campaign, whether it's for 2012 or on behalf of the American working families. He was setting out that course to say, come on, let's debate these issues out in the open. And that's why he's glad that the Republicans have finally moved from possibly being a party of no to having a budget plan for 2012, and that will be debated and aired out. And there's already been several commentaries on it. We have Zandy, who was McCain's economist, saying that it would reduce GDP.
Okay,
with reduction in GDP, you have no jobs. You get reduction in jobs.
In the interest of time, I want to pull the train to a halt there because
Sure.
I want to move on to, you've made some of those points before already this morning. David, do you see a shift in this president's tone and tenor at this point? Do you see him becoming more combative because that's what the fight will call for? Is he changing?
I don't characterize it as combating. I think it's just being forceful and putting across his points that he wants to make to clarify to the American people the distinction between what the GOP puts forth and what his vision has been and will continue to be.
As strategy, would you tell the president that he needs to show that kind of strength or whatever you want to call it?
Oh, absolutely. And
Why?
Also getting across the country and doing just the same as he did in Chicago, his hometown. And obviously it's working because he pulled $2 million out of Chicago in launching his campaign.
Oh, come on.
And
You're
I can
not
tell
surprised he pulled $2 million out of his
No, I can tell you.
hometown.
The reason I raised that point is because...
Yeah, and Rahm Emanuel, his former chief of staff, is the mayor. Come on, David.
Listen, when President Clinton was in office and I was at the DNC raising money, the most we ever got out of there was maybe $800,000. So he's topped that by $1.2 million. You'll see that across the country as well.
Wait. Oh, okay. I don't even know how to touch that one. But
Something
go ahead.
about 2012. I think it's ironic and somewhat unfortunate that the president is able to define what the topic of the election is going to be. In fact, he came out and said it's going to be about fixing the economy, coming up with a good budget, and there's no leader of the Republican Party to go up against him right now. So he can continue to have this conversation with himself for 6 months or so while he's raising money, and it becomes all of a sudden this guy who doesn't know how to vote on the debt ceiling is all of a sudden the expert on the subject.
Yeah, some of the best conversations I've ever seen a politician have is with him or herself. Let's talk about...
To add to the irony...
Please,
Harris,
hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Sure.
David, to add to your point to add to David's point about there being a lack of leadership at the top of the Republicans with regard to Mr. Obama having kind of a foil, where is that person?
Well, it's lack of official leadership because we don't have a nominee. But I think that there are a few very compelling candidates that are...
What do you like?
Well, I've been cooped up in the lab for the last few months, so I don't know. I don't have anybody that I'm particularly supporting right now. But you saw Governor Romney announce his candidacy this week, and he very much could come across as the adult in the room in all this. He's been through this before. He has created thousands of private sector jobs. He's run a government successfully, and he's going to be a formidable candidate. And it'd be very interesting to see him debate President Obama on these issues where I think he's more fluent.
And there wouldn't be a debate on health care because he did Obamacare in Massachusetts when he was governor.
Well, he recognized that it should be done on the state level and not the federal level.
How do you get beyond the similarities between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama?
There's a big difference between doing healthcare on a state level and healthcare on the federal level, and I think that.
Are we hoping that it'll work better on the federal level than it did in Massachusetts?
Hope is not a strategy.
Oh, touche, David Mercer.
Listen, there's also some irony. I mean, yeah, there are two candidates that have announced exploratory committees, but you don't see any candidate coming out and starting to champion and campaign on the Paul Ryan budget or anything close to it. And so I think that says a whole lot as to whether there is leadership, and two, whether they have any ideas, because certainly Paul Ryan's ideas aren't getting picked up by any of the potential GOP nominees.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think so? Mm-hmm. Because I think that they know that Paul Ryan is misdirecting people in saying that it's budget cuts to Medicare, or reducing that. Instead of that, he's actually shifting the costs to states and those who will be left on their own through vouchers to pay for what will inevitably be rising costs, because he's done nothing in the budget to reduce those costs. So I think that's why they have not been vocal in support or saying anything about it, and don't want to step on that rail right now.
I just got a little email message from our producer, in full disclosure. She says you're fired up. Have we hit a nerve with you this morning?
2012 is around the corner.
Well, you should be worried. We only have a budget in place for 4.5 months. Because it took us so long to get this one. David, real quickly before I have to say goodbye to you, the president in his hometown, where do you think he should be stomping at this point? And I say stomping because, let's face it, he's hitting the ground pretty hard. That quote that I read twice here on the show this morning, he's also fired up, but in a different way.
Yep. Of course, you're going to go into the major markets, money markets, whether that be Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Florida, Miami, Florida, New York, and elsewhere, because you need to build a base of financial support so that you can therefore get around the country, get ads out to support your proposals, and to get out and touch the people. So I think that's what you're going to see in the coming weeks, so that he can put away any sense of a challenge. It's also money that he's going to keep in the bank for himself, and doesn't have to compete against others in a potential primary in the Democratic side, which the Republicans are going to have to do. Yeah,
you have quite a strategy there. I think it's interesting. First, on the one hand, you say the Republicans don't have a clear presidential candidate and leader position, and yet you want this president to posture as if there were a single person he were going against, and spend a whole lot of money and collect a whole lot of money. And you think maybe it's not a shoo-in? Yes or no? And then I have to let you go.
Oh, in politics, you never say anything's a shoo-in, and you never take anything for granted, and you uncover every stone you can in getting every vote you can, or preparing for that on 2012 Election Day. So we're going to go at this like we have 7 opponents, as there are 7 or 8 potential nominees on the GOP side. We want to make sure that whoever emerges, they're already knocked out of the box, and they're coming in late.
David Mercer, Democratic strategist, sounds like, did you hear the shift? He said sounds like he's going to be working with some people. We'll talk about that next time. Have a great weekend.
All right, very good to see you both.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, David,